Hey everybody, TacticAngel, back on the PlayStation 5 for another premium ship review in World of Warships Legends. Today we'll be talking about the Hyuga, the Tier 5 Imperial Japanese premium battleship. For this review, we'll start with an overview, talk about commanders, look over the stats, and then get into some gameplay. If you'd like to check out my video on the Hyuga's history, or jump around in this video, please check the links down in the description. The Hyuga is technically the 5th premium Japanese battleship at Tier 5, but if you consider that 2 of those are Control-C, Control-V Fusos, and 1 is a recolored Mutsu, it's really more like the 2nd that offers a substantive difference from the already available ships in-game. It offers a playstyle that is very close to Fuso, with a dozen guns arranged in 6 turrets. It has some frills, and then the first one is already advertised on screen. That's right, this ship has a main battery reload boost. In fact, she gets 2 charges, allowing you to reduce the reload of these guns at opportune moments to something under 15 seconds. If that wasn't advantage enough, the Hyuga actually has improved gun performance versus Fuso in almost every way except for range. Faster reload, notably improved turret traverse, and a tighter shell grouping. And where the Fuso does have, certainly, the capacity to quickly lose all of its hit points at almost any range, the Hyuga actually has both a larger hit point pool and a complicated but effective armor scheme that I'm going to have to try to figure out how to explain later in this review. To the extent that it pays for any of these advantages with an equal number of disadvantages would require some pretty creative thinking. Other than having unimpressive AA defense, there's not really much to complain about here. Sure, the AA is slightly worse than even Fuso, but the trade-off here highly favors Hyuga. After that, you'd be grasping for straws to come up with really any negative thing to say about this ship. So folks who will like the Hyuga are people who will enjoy pretty much any other decent 14-inch battleship, especially at Tier 5. It will take slightly more effort to aim than if you had big guns, but you have a lot of them and patience with your timing, your shots can make this a really high damage potential ship. Frankly, I can't imagine anyone who is even lukewarm to the Fuso saying they wouldn't like the Hyuga better, in no small part because it doesn't appear to be balanced. When selecting a commander for Hyuga, I know people will expect me to go straight into a survivability captain. In using Nobutake Kondo, you will end up with a ship that can move around at its full speed with impressive health, more resilient to fire, and with a lot more capacity to recover damage of almost every sort. All of these things are true, owing in part to the large hit point pool that you're going to start with, and anything that improves the effectiveness and the number of heals that you get is going to be that much more noticeable in this kind of ship. That said, you really only get a hint at how much more accurate the Hyuga is than Fuso, since there's no emphasis on being able to actually hit anything. So if you want to use this commander, at times it'll still feel like you're just throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks, but you'll be able to throw stuff at the wall probably longer thanks to those improved heals that you get. If you do want to take advantage of the guns though, then Takeo Takagi has really just about everything that you need to do that. Though not normally the kind of person who uses accuracy commanders, between marksmanship, flammable cannoneer, a spotter plane, and inspirations, you can really feel the difference between 1.8 and 1.5 Sigma, as all of a sudden you start worrying that your shells might actually bump into each other mid-flight. Don't worry, that's not possible, at least inside of this game. And though you can get even faster turrets, the downsides to this are maneuverability and betting whether you can kill those pesky cruisers before they burn you to death. That said, if you do take Flammable Cannoneer, I would be careful not to try to play this thing at max range, because if something is going to go catastrophically wrong for you, it's going to be when taking battleship shells at extreme range. If you're stuck using Togo Haihachiro, well, if you've made this an active decision for this, Fully Packed does give you access to a 3rd reload booster. That could be funny, and is in keeping with the Fuso's throw stuff at the wall approach. But if you're not in it for that, then you have almost no legitimate options here except the prospect of an even faster, more maneuverable Hyuga. The potential for as stealthy a battleship as you can make this, and of course, the minor advantages to HE damage and range. None of this is really good outside of fully packed. As we jump into stats, I'll probably mention the Fuso a bunch, and that ship will give you a pretty good idea how this one will work, as it is pretty much the premium version of that in more ways than one. Starting with the Hyuga's survivability, she starts with an impressive 60,700 hit points, which is about 3,000 more than Fuso, which itself also has about 3,000 more than the average Tier 5 battleship. This screen lists 6 to 350 millimeters of armor, and the armor model will show us that it's actually not the belt that's 350 millimeters. It's sections of the barbettes, and your belt is only 299 millimeters. After we get past that fact, though, explaining this armor scheme in 10,000 words or less is going to become an exercise of what do you want to leave out. Because this looks like the work of a really talented intern who is just trying to impress his boss with the polygon tool. So, I'm just going to skip kind of to the end of the conclusions. The bad news about this armor profile is that you have a city block sitting atop this ship that is easy to hit with HE. This is probably the best place to farm this for light cruisers and destroyers. You also have a 26mm bow, so it can be punched through the nose by 15 and 16-inch battleships. This is a common vulnerability at Tier 5, not really a disadvantage, but it is something to note. The rest of this mess generally is going to do good things for the survivability of Hyuga. You have an enormous torpedo bulge, which is 32 millimeters. This is going to eat up tons of high explosive damage if you get hit low on the ship. I really wouldn't target this area as an AP cruiser unless you think you're going to get all the way through the layer behind it, which is kinda doubtful. Instead, stick to the casemate and superstructure. And speaking of armor layers, if you're shooting battleship shells, I think the short story is don't expect many citadels from Hyuga when trying to punch through 32 millimeters, then 299 millimeters, then a 32 millimeter turtleback, and then, and only then, I give you the Hyuga's Citadel. With 6 armor angles and 8 armor thicknesses and 5 sections of varying width, I think this is as near a visual embodiment of RNG as anything I have seen inside of a ship. If you want to defeat this armor, it's best to do so from long range with plunging fire through its deck. Am I sure about that? No. And I think in the entire time I've had this ship, it hasn't happened to me yet, but this is the same kind of layered, spaced turtleback armor that makes ships like the Richelieu a pain to citadel. And while I say that, understand the Richelieu actually has less armor values and is at tier 7. Then throw some very good 34% torpedo reduction, and the short story is Hyuga is a very well protected tier 5 battleship. And she is pretty formidable in main battery too. You have a total of 12 guns and 6 turrets. Both of the turrets amidships faced aftward, which makes her a bit more capable as a kiter than Fuso, and your 14-inch guns have good range at 16.2, though this is about a half a kilometer less than you'd find on Fuso. With the 29-second reload of your main battery guns, you're on the faster edge of average, and 45-second turret traverse on this tier is actually pretty comfortable. If you're compelled to shoot HE, the Hyuga has very decent damage at 5,700 per HE shell with a 25% fire chance. As most battleships have better things to do with their guns than being middling fire starters, the 10,200 damage on their AP is more important. That's not very high damage, but thanks to your large number of guns, you're towards the upper end of both damage potential over time, as well as with a single salvo. Though your armor scheme and reasonable turret rotation may have you thinking about getting close to the enemy, the Hyuga only has 4 kilometer secondaries. That is going to limit the viability of this ship as a brawler, even if she does have good damage and fire potential when ships finally do get into range. Instead, the Hyuga is probably better played between 9 and 12 kilometers, where your armor can do the most work for you, and if you can get the red team to chase you at all, that much the better. Next, moving to AA, if the Hyuga pays at all for her strengths in anything, it's worth her AA suite. But if that's the price you're going to pay, it's not too severe. This 47 rating is low, and even worse than the Fuso, which is definitely not an AA beast, even in its wildest dreams. The good news here is that you start putting flak out at 5 kilometers. The combined 90 DPS between long and medium range AA is pretty low. If you're a carrier player and want to strike this ship, it offers a big target with a decent damage output that is right about average for a cruiser. In any case, you should expect that most tier 5 carriers will get 2 strikes off on you and probably lose around 2 planes. When jumping into maneuverability, the 25.3 knots that Hyuga comes with is not exactly blowing the socks off of everyone else, but it is definitely faster than most battleships. She pays for that a little bit with a 60 meter wider turning circle than normal, and she is about 1 second slower on her rudder shift. Overall though, she doesn't feel sluggish for a tier 5 battleship. There's not much to say about Hyuga's concealment. You're definitely not going to be able to sneak around the battlefield very well in a battleship period, and the values are a very slight 100 meters worse than on other tier 5 battleships, except for this almost never important firing from smoke number. Your consumables aren't remarkable on Hyuga, except for one fairly obvious exception. We'll get there soon. First, you have your totally normal damage control party, then we come to your repair party, which is also standard issue battleship repair party, 3 charges of 0.5% HP recovery for 28 seconds. Since you do have a catapult, you do have the option of either taking a fighter or a spotter or secondary targeting consumable. I'd start with saying that the secondary targeting is probably the least viable of the 3 options, just because it's hard to get inside of those ranges with your secondaries, without maybe throwing away everything else that the ship is good at. A fighter isn't a bad option if you're concerned about being struck by carriers, and in tier 5 matches, carriers are actually quite common, so this really isn't a wasted option if you do choose that. That said, the spotter plane is always going to be useful. The Hyuga has better shell grouping than Fuso, and the use of this consumable can make for some comically tight shell groupings. It also pairs nicely with the next consumable, since it is very easy to get 2 shots out of your spotter aircraft when you can press a button and have the time it takes to reload your main battery. You come with 2 uses of this main battery reload booster, and it is clearly the thing intended to sell this ship. It's very good. Alright, and finally with all that out of the way, we'll get into some gameplay. We're going to be on Neighbors, and as the game starts up, we'll put our commander up on the screen. There's really not a lot of surprises here. This is your standard sort of, I would like to hit something build. I'm sure you've used it on Fuso, and you'll be able to see how it is that this ship differs versus Fuso. We've also got our 2 inspirations there, which are Cunningham with a little bit more accuracy, and De Revel to make these fast-firing guns even slightly faster. Never hurt. The one thing I would change, and I did change when testing this later, is maybe you want to switch out gyrating drill bits for just crisscross, because that'll allow you to keep your max speed above 25 knots, and that actually makes you a reasonably fast tier 5 battleship. Now we get our first set of shells out there on Gorky. It disappeared right as we were shooting, and it looks like he started maneuvering sometime around that time as well. So we don't get a whole lot out of that. We started off the game with 1 single over penetration, but you did see these guns are not just chucking shells wherever they want. They stay pretty close together. The groupings there, and again on the Geta, which is aggressively slowing down, also pretty tight. We do come away with 2 over penetrations at 12 kilometers. Any sort of damage that you can do to a destroyer is kind of impressive. You know he can't respond in any way. And since I don't have anything else to shoot at, as a battleship player, I'm not going to play that it's not my job game. Sometimes it's nice to shoot at the little boats, and demonstrate at least minimal human survival instincts. Because eventually, if you don't shoot at him, he's going to come and find you and torpedo you. In any case, you can see, thanks to the gyrating drill bits, we're not going to get all the way up to 25 knots. We're going to get into the mid-23s. So kind of the pre-refit Hyuga sort of speed there. But it is a little bit of a pain, particularly if we want to be helping over at A. Shooting at the front of a Nelson, we have just small enough guns that he can bounce us off of his nose. We're hoping for something, because if we're not shooting at him, then we're not shooting at anything. We do double our total damage in the game by scoring another 4,500 or so. We're a little far out here. This is a poorly aimed shot. You can see, in retrospect, it appears as though the Andrea Doria is turning out. And indeed, we will land all of our shells to one side of him. That is kind of the downside of having a very accurate ship, is when you miss, you really miss. If I were shooting a shotgun over there, guarantee you there's at least some chance I hit something. With these guns, a lot less likely, because they're going to be close to target. I'm not real excited about what I'm doing right now. What I'm doing is pushing up to A directly, more or less, because I'm just so slow I don't want to drive all the way around this island. And this is probably about the time I start thinking if I've made, certain mistakes in my life. Or at least when I'm choosing my captain. And I should have maybe gone for that crisscross instead. And the Nelson is exactly the reason why I'm not real keen on doing this as a 16-inch battleship. On the off chance that it is shooting AP, it has one of the better chances of really doing something to me among all of the ships that this can face as a Tier 5 battleship. If it's not shooting AP, which is likely, then it's shooting HE that is just awful. And I'm just going to get set on fire super easy with that flammable cannoneer in slot 1. But that flammable cannoneer is going to help me a little bit later in the game, I think. It's also the reason, probably, why I have in my second equipment slot the Damage Con module. Putting some more shells out there on Nelson. Whoo, that's a lot of nothing. Whole bunch of bounces, and that's just not going to work. So as you can see, we're giving him a fairly steep angle to shoot at. He can punch straight through my bow. But also one of the things about Hyuga is if I can shoot my guns all forward, then I'm at an angle where at least there is a penetration chance. I'm definitely not at an auto bounce angle, and that's something to keep in mind, particularly when you're dealing with ships that have really large caliber guns. I actually think his best chance of hitting me at this range and really doing a lot of damage is if he got me through the nose. But that angle is going to let me choose where I get hit to some degree. Now we've activated the main battery reload booster because we see the Andrea Doria coming around the corner. He is not paying attention to us. And that sometimes happens when you have a ship that's this accurate and you get to shoot at something that's that broadside. Sometimes you don't really get to use your full main battery reload booster. I mean, it's a nice problem if you can have it. But at least in that case, we started loading up early just to make sure that we got our guns on target while he was presenting that broadside, and that is a really powerful trick. Now we're going to get into a gun battle with the California. This is not my favorite option either, because he also has 12 guns, and he is an American battleship, so he has certain advantages. But we are going to get an opportunity to see what it's like to take hits in this particular boat. Now, we did a nice job there, chunked him for over 9,000 damage. And again, we're giving about the best angle that we can that allows us to turn in or turn out as we see fit. And you can hear a couple of bounces there off the side of my hull. So that torpedo protection working as intended. We go a little bit higher on California because it's got so much plating that citadeling the thing is sometimes a bit of a chore. Just getting 12 full pens is often just enough. We're going to speed this up just a bit because we're a little bit out of position, and also, as I said before, we're not super fast in this particular configuration. But as you can see, we've opened up a pretty decent game here. We've taken a lot of hits, and actually Takeo Takagi's ability to increase the amount that you can heal even as an accuracy commander is kind of nice when you have this many hit points. It doesn't feel as bad to run this as an accuracy boat when you do get to fall back on a little bit extra survivability with your commander skill. And now we're basically coming up on the range of some of these enemy ships, so we're back at relatively normal speed for the game. We do have some pretty good range in terms of how far our guns reach out there, and we should be able to start contributing again. I'd lead that Nuremberg a whole lot because I expect that he is probably trying to accelerate behind that particular island. We get some shells on target, but we were a little bit off in terms of how far away he was. Still not too bad. Enemy Nagato is way out there. This would have been an excellent opportunity to use that spotter aircraft just to try to get those a little bit closer together at extreme range. We still tag him really nicely for 14,000 damage. And I'm maintaining that angle against Nagato because he's really the only thing that can really hurt me here. The Helena can certainly annoy me, as it annoys all sorts of people. It looks like he has pretty good accuracy too, because all of those shells landed right next to each other. But we're not going to get too aggressive in fighting him. You can see we're starting to correct our turn back to starboard. And that's to avoid this whole getting shot in the side thing. I'm pretty sure the Nagato can't hit anything, so I'd probably be safe just because of RNG, but I'm not really looking to experiment on how much damage I can take if I extremely poorly angle this ship. Actually, at this range, I would suspect he could punch through my deck. I guess we'll see if he decides to return fire. Activating our second main battery reload booster, we finally decide to launch a plane, which probably should have happened a lot earlier. Our next set of shells is right on target, and we finish off the last 5,000 or so health that he had. And that's game. So my closing thoughts on Hyuga: it definitely breaks the mold of unimpressive Japanese premium battleships, it might even break that mold a bit too hard. To me, she definitely feels more like a tier 6 ship because other than the range and some pretty fringe marginal advantages, like the size of her superstructure, why do premium Fuso battleships even need to exist when you can get this instead? It's just better. I mean, I can think of a couple reasons, but precious few of them are game related. Hyuga is a very strong ship, and given the number of them I've seen out there already, I sense that this is no small secret. But I'll be interested to know what you guys think down in the comments. Make sure to check out the history of the Hyuga if you haven't done so already. I hope you've enjoyed the video as always, and I'll see you on the next one.